Hello again everyone and welcome to the first proper episode of Bilmasri. I hope by now you got to hear episode 0 where I talk a bit about what this podcast and the blog are all about. You may also read a shorter introduction in the About section of the blog at www.bilmasri.com. Today's text is a story from the news which I'm sure by now everyone's familiar with. On the corresponding blog post you can read the original Fusha or Modern Standard Arabic text alongside the Ammiya or Egyptian dialect version. Alternatively, you may just focus on the podcast and look up the Modern Standard Arabic text later. How you use Bilmasri is up to you. After reading the text, I will talk to you about a word that you've heard in it, and I'll also talk you through the pronunciation of some consonants in Egyptian Arabic. On the blog post, you'll find an overview of these consonants in a table form. So, without further delay, let's get started. الملكة إليزابيث الثانية ملكة بريطانيا استدعت شخصيات ملكية كبيرة عشان يقابلوها يوم الاثنين عشان تناقش معاهم مستقبل علاقة دوق ودوقة ساسكس بالمؤسسة الملكية. مسؤولين في القصر الملكي قالوا إنهم يتوقعوا إن ميغان تشارك في الاجتماع من كندا بالتليفون. هاري وميغان كانوا أعلنوا عن نيتهم إنهم يتخلوا عن مهامهم الملكية. الزوجين عايزين يوزعوا وقتهم بين أمريكا الشمالية وبريطانيا. ده هيكون أول لقاء بين الملكة والأمير هاري من ساعة إعلانه الأخير. وبيقولوا إن العيلة الملكية اتأثرت من البيان اللي أصدروه هاري وميغان، وطلع إن هاري ما ناقش الأمر مع الملكة قبل ما يعلنوا. ومن المتوقع إن الملكة تناقش احتمالات مختلفة مع الأمراء تشارلز وويليام وهاري، وإنهم ياخدوا في الاعتبار الوضع اللي الزوجين شرحوه. الأمير تشارلز موجود في عمان حالياً عشان يقوم بواجب العزاء في موت السلطان قابوس ابن سعيد. في الأثناء دي دوق كامبريدج عبر عن حزنه بسبب انقطاع الصلة مع أخوه حسب ما ذكرت الصحيفة ساندي تايمز. ميغان رجعت كندا عشان تنضم لابنها اللي عمره 8 شهور. هي كانت قضت أجازة عيد الميلاد في كندا مع جوزها قبل ما يرجعوا بريطانيا يوم الثلاث. Well, how did you get on? Were you able to follow? Was it more different from the Fusha than you expected or more similar? First off, a little vocabulary quiz question. In the text I just read, the word Ashan came up a few times, 4 times in fact. Do you remember what it meant? Let's hear the sentences where it came up again and try not to look at the Fusha text for now, unless you have already. The word appears twice in the following sentence. الملكة إليزابيث الثانية ملكة بريطانيا استدعت شخصيات ملكية كبيرة عشان يقابلوها يوم الاثنين عشان تناقش معاهم مستقبل علاقة دوق ودوقة ساسكس بالمؤسسة الملكية. And once in each of the following sentences. الأمير تشارلز موجود في عمان حالياً عشان يقوم بواجب العزاء في موت السلطان قابوس. ميغان رجعت كندا عشان تنضم لابنها اللي عمره 8 شهور. So what do you think? If you check these sentences against the Fusha text, you'll find that عشان has replaced the little particle li, which had been followed by either a verb or a noun. So للقائها, لمناقشة, لمنعهما, ليؤدي, لتنضم. So you may have guessed, عشان means in order to or so that, and it also means because. Very often you'll hear that as علشان. So عشان and علشان. And that may give you some insight into how the word came about. So عشان, علشان, على شأن. So literally on the matter of, which then became compressed into عشان and acquired the meaning of in order to or so that. Here are some more simple examples. كل أكلك عشان تكبر. So eat your food so you can grow up, something mothers like to tell their kids. أنا خرجت عشان الجو جميل. I went out because the weather is lovely. Now, because this is the first episode, I only want to focus on one more thing, and that's the pronunciation. Obviously, the Egyptian dialect differs in many ways from Fusha or MSA, But very often the only difference is in the way certain consonants are pronounced. And here the main culprits, so to speak, are just a handful of consonants. These are the letters th, j, th, ظ, ق, and also the hamza. Let's look at some words we heard just now that illustrate the differences. Firstly, the letter th. The letter th is never ever pronounced th in Egyptian dialect. In fact, most Egyptians will struggle to pronounce the th even when they're speaking Fusha. So the th becomes one of two things. In some words, it becomes a t, as in the numbers اتنين, تلاتة, تمانية. In today's text, we heard يوم التلات, Tuesday, الملكة Elizabeth الثانية, Elizabeth II, and obviously I said Elizabeth because I know how to pronounce the th, but very often people will just say Elizabeth. And 8 شهور, 8 months. But in other words, the th becomes a s. In today's text, we heard اتأثر, was affected. Another common word is ثورة, revolution, which should really be ثورة. And each of these words is just pronounced that way. That is, you don't get to decide if you want to turn a th into a sa or ta. So unfortunately, it's already been decided for you. The next letter is quite simple. The letter jim is pronounced gim by most Egyptians. And I have to stress this most bit because, as with any language, there are regional variations. But in Cairo and north of Cairo, it's pronounced ga. In most of the southern parts of Egypt, it's pronounced ja. So in today's text, we heard riga, agaza, wagib. Next we have the, and very similar to what we just said for letter th, the in Egyptian takes on two different forms, either da or za. So in today's text, we heard akhad, meaning akhad, or to take, and zakar, meaning dhakar, or to mention. The next letter is one that we don't come across too much, and that's the letter va, and in fact it didn't come up in today's text at all. However, in the vast majority of cases, the va turns into a sound that doesn't actually exist in the Arabic alphabet at all, and that is za, a sort of emphatic zain, za. For example, dharf, meaning circumstance or also envelope, becomes zarf, or dharif, meaning nice, becomes zarif. In some rare cases, it can turn into a da, so dhil, meaning shadow, becomes dhil. The fifth consonant that is often pronounced differently in Egyptian is the letter qaf, and that's for obvious reasons. Just like you, we Egyptians think it's just too much of an effort. So very often the qaf turns into a hamza sound, a. There were plenty of examples in today's text. Abil for qabil, al, waqt, asr, mustaqbal, na'ish, and others. On the other hand, we also heard some words where the qaf is pronounced as a qaf. For some reason in Egyptian Arabic, we have retained the qaf sound for a few select words. So today we heard alaqa, relationship, alaqa, duq, the duke, yatwaqqa, expect, and niqash, and liqa as well. And this is unlike, for example, Lebanese Arabic, where I think all the qaf turn into hamza, and also unlike Moroccans, where the qaf is always pronounced as a qaf. So in Egypt, we keep things a bit ambiguous, I guess. Now, last but not least, we have the hamza sound itself. At the start of a word, the hamza sound obviously stays, because it can't go anywhere, although the vowel that the hamza is placed on sometimes changes into a different vowel. So, for example, ijaza becomes agaza. In the middle of the word, the hamza can remain unchanged, for example, in a word like qa'id, leader, or su'al, question. Or sometimes it is softened, as in the word na'im, sleeping, which becomes na'yim, na'im, na'yim. At the end of the word, the hamza either stays as it is, as in the names wafa and isra, for example, or it is simply dropped, as in asha, dinner, which becomes asha. Or another word we heard today was umara, the plural of amir, prince, which should really be umara. So that's enough for today, I think. We will come back to pronunciation issues in future episodes, I'm sure, but we'll also look at grammar of the Egyptian dialect, syntax, vocabulary, culture, and much more. So, إلى اللقاء في الحلقة الجاية. See you in the next episode.